Well, today is an interesting day. It's my first day at work since turning 40, because I had a bit of time off. It's the first day of the financial year, which means I'm full on midlife crisis mode and ever so slightly questioning everything. So today, I'm blinded by the light. What I'd like to do today is show you how I got to this point in my career, what I would have done differently, and what I would do if I wanted to get here today. Now, full transparency. When I started this career, I was not in a good place. I was in my young 20s, I was suffering with rather extreme PTSD from something that happened, and I had some particular health issues. So I was both medicated for both of those things there. I was medicated by a doctor, but I was also self-medicating and rather self-destructive at the time. It was not my finest hour. So I'm going to split this into three sections. There is my beginning of career, the section of my career where I started having success but in a different genre, and my current career. And I'm then going to tell you how I would do it if I was starting afresh today, because between when I started in 2009, 2010 and today, I could have probably got here in 2 years. We're going to look at kit and career choices. Now, at the beginning of my career, as I stated, I was not in the best places mental health wise. I had no fixed address, I had no money, and it was a bit of a shit show. Here's how I made it work. I borrowed a camera from my uncle, which was very fortunate that he had one. He had a 450D that he bought for a holiday. He let me borrow that camera. I started shooting everything, literally everything. If you wanted an event photographer, wedding photographer, portrait photography, you needed some products photographing, and you wanted it doing cheap, I was your guy. I was useless, I was incompetent, I was shooting on JPEG, but back then you could get away with that sort of stuff, if I'm honest. If you wanted cheap photos, I was your guy. During this part of my career, the cheap photo days, I shot with a friend called Hitesh. Hitesh was the like sort of go-to Asian wedding photographer in Leicester. I was his second shooter, third shooter. I was his assistant. I mean, I was so useless at the start. He used to give me a camera, I'd take it back, and I'd basically just format the memory card because he knew it was no good. But for whatever reason, he took the time to help me, and I'm very appreciative of that. He lent me cameras, he lent me his Hasselblad for a magazine cover once, and his lighting. He let me use his studio for some jobs. Really good guy, still talk to him today. Top lad. But I was not in the best of places. So I was working. Eventually I was like, right, I need to buy my own camera. I'm going to buy a Canon 50D. They're £400 secondhand, and I'll get the Sigma, they're like 1835 2.8. So I saved up for those. By this point, I'd got fixed address. I was living with a girlfriend, and I'd got a part-time job. I can't remember what it was doing, to be honest. These dates are all a bit muddy, I'm afraid. So I was doing that, got some flashes, got some off-camera flashes, like, you know, hot shoe flashes, but with pocket wizards. Off I went, I was working, I was getting paid, I was making enough money to scrape by. It was okay, I was doing fine. And this carried on up until the point where I got my first studio and agent. Now, these years here, I bought a lot of camera kit, and I spent a lot of time on the internet, on f-stoppers, on, who's that guy I shoot JPEGs? Ken Rockwell. Ken Rockwell. All these websites, researching what kit I needed next. And I bought so many lenses, so many cheap shit lenses. I bought them all. I bought all of them. I wasted so much money. During this period, after getting the 50D, I then bought a 5D Mark I from Jacobs or Jessop's whenever they went bust. That was £800. And I remember this because it seemed like so much more money than my 50D, and it was so much more camera, a full frame camera. It felt like a tank. I wish I still had it. I believe I left it at one of the Flash Center branches once, I can't remember. Maybe Kev's got it, I'll ask him. But that was the first pro camera I bought. And I was shooting weddings with it, portraits with it, events with it, everything. I was the guy with camera. I was cheap because my only value was I had a camera and I knew how to shoot it. That was it. I had no real skill. I could do exposure and off-camera flash, whoop-de-doo. I eventually bought the 5D Mark II, and I bought that because that's what Hitesh used as well. Hits also had the 5D Mark IIs, although by the time I bought mine, he'd moved up to the 5D Mark IIIs, which were much better for autofocus and dual card slots and whatnot. Image quality was the same. And eventually I'd got a pair of 5D Mark IIs. At one point I had 5 5D Mark IIs because
I was so busy being that guy who can take a photograph that I was doing 2 to 3 shoots a day. I was non-stop shooting. I loved it, to be honest. It was great. It kept me busy and it kept me away from all the naughty things I was doing. So that was all great. I made a lot of mistakes in this period. Firstly, the biggest mistake in period 1 was that I shot everything. It's very hard to progress when every waking hour is already accounted for by work. The next big mistake I made was kit-wise. I kept making incremental upgrades. Now at the time, give myself a bit of credit here, going from a £400 camera to an £800 camera was a big deal. It took a lot of saving. Saving £800 took me ages. I believe some sort of tax rebate happened which helped me get there. I can't remember exactly. Something happened. I came into a few £100s through something. I would have been better to stick with the 450D, not buy the 50D and just save up, because incremental upgrades are the thief of time and money. If you're going to upgrade, upgrade. If you've got a full frame camera, don't upgrade to another full frame camera, get a medium format camera. You know, go big or go home. Same with lighting. Now at this point, I'd got my studio and I'd got my first agent. We're into phase 2 of my career. Come with me. Phase 2 of my career, we had a first studio and then we moved into this studio here eventually. But phase 2, this is where I started making real money and a name for myself. I got my first agent, a chap called Graham, who absolutely hates me, I believe. He sends Christmas cards to everyone in the house apart from me. Lovely. But, you know, I still love him. He did me a great service. He took me on when I was an absolute nightmare, an absolute liability, a disaster, and he represented me. And at this point here, I'd got my 2 5D Mark IIs, I'd got a flotilla of Bowens lights. We started the Bowens Frankenstein system because they stopped making them, which is where we kept all the broken ones and just started sticking 2 broken ones into one functioning one. Great times. We took on this studio place here, the Tin House Studio. This period takes me through to like COVID. At this point, I was shooting portraits. I was known as the portrait photographer. If you wanted a portrait, you came to me. I did a portrait sitting for £10,000 for somebody in the Palace of Versailles. I did all these great portraits. I was traveling on tour with bands. It was good. I was successful by every metric I wanted to be successful by. I had a bit of cash in my pocket. I had somewhere nice to live. I was working, I was doing cool things, I was going to cool parties. However, I hadn't really addressed the issues I had with the PTSD at this stage yet. I was still very much suffering with that sort of thing. I was still self-medicating, which is not ideal, and I should have fixed those problems by now because I was an adult. I didn't, but I should have done. At this point, we were shooting big stuff. We were shooting for Iceland, we were shooting for Mars, we were shooting for, I don't know, brands like that. I started doing food, but it was the old style of food. It was that sort of like not bloggy style, it was a sort of Jamie Oliver style. It was the Loftus world of food photography. That's what I was sort of shooting, that's what I was aiming for. It wasn't really me, but I knew I had to get away from portraits because they were bad for my health, bad for my mental health, bad for everything. I had to get away from that world. I was going on tour with bands for really long periods of time. That's obviously not a good idea for someone like me. I was, you know, it was all just like partying with models and like, it was a nightmare. It sounds great, but at the time it was really bad for me. Could do it today, couldn't have done it, shouldn't have done it then. But there I was, I'd got my kit, I was shooting. It was going really well. It was going really, really well. And at this point, I made the best equipment decisions within my career. For this entire period, which spanned quite a while, it was probably a decade, I suppose. And I apologize if the years are messy here, but it was probably about a decade. I just got to it. 5D Mark IIs, they're everywhere in this studio. The 100mm prime, we just cracked on with it. Up until about 2018, we didn't really buy any kit. And that was a perfect decision. Then COVID hit, and I had the sudden issue that I'd got kids at this point, so I wasn't partying like I used to. Instead of being self-destructive like that, my self-destructive nature was to work excessively, and it still slightly is. And I suddenly couldn't work, and I identify myself as my work. So I went and I got a camera. At this time, I just bought a 5DSR, my Zeiss Milvus Macro Planar, a Bowens light, and this part of a reflector, because the top bit's missing on this one, and that's all I had. And I shot an entire body of work of what I wanted to shoot. We'd been away just before COVID, and it had been, a conversation had happened anyway, and basically my partner was like, why are you doing all this stuff when you like doing like graphic, bold, pop art, design, sort of minimalist, knolling and all the rest of it? And I was like, well, I don't know. So COVID happened, that's what I did. This is the third phase of my career. I shot that body of work during lockdown. Lockdown opened up. I phoned every agent in the country and the majority of them wanted to meet with me, which I was quite surprised by. I did a bit of work with Bernstein and Andreoli, shot some stuff for Pepsi, some stuff for Doritos, that sort of thing. And then I signed with Lisa Pritchard, my first bigger agent, I suppose. At LPA, we did the work. We did some big campaigns, did some cool stuff. It was a weird time because it was coming out of COVID, like work was sporadic. It was like all or nothing. It was like really busy and then it was just dead, gone. But it was great. Now, during this period, I got the first Cambo. I bought my Cambo from a friend of mine I know, and with it came a 50mm Mamiya Secor lens from an RZ67. Shot with that for a bit, it was a bit too wide. At the time, my mate Drew used to work in here a lot, and he had loads of Mamiya RZ67s. And he gave me his 200, no he didn't, I paid him 200 quid for his RB 67 90mm lens, which became the lens I used throughout that phase and into my current phase of my career. That lens that was a good lens. That was a good return on investment, that lens. Had its foibles, had its faults, wasn't as good as the previous lens I was using, which is interesting. Wasn't as good as the Carl Zeiss macro planar lens, but despite that, did me an enormous service. Now, I made more money with the 100mm Goldring lens, because I used it for longer. The least amount of money with the macro planar lens, despite it being the best lens I've ever owned, and then more money again with the 90mm Secor lens. But that's the bit I use, and I started buying Broncolor equipment. We started picking it up, like, this is really dark, but lots of companies went bust during COVID, so I went there like a vulture and picked up their equipment after they'd gone bankrupt. So they started picking up that sort of kit. We were shooting for a lot of stuff now, and then I met with these people called Darklight, had a quick chat with them, and I was like, I'm not really happy where I am with my career. Explained a few bits, and they're like, why don't you change agent? And I was like, yeah, do you know what I really should do? So I did, I changed, I signed to Agent at Large and Peter Gearing, we'll get to that in a bit, we'll phone him actually. And yeah, it was a weird time. Now, the mistakes I made in this third phase of my career, and this is going up to shooting, like, there's a phase in London where every billboard was mine. I didn't upgrade my equipment fast enough. I was shooting on a 5DSR, I should have moved to a medium format camera straight away because I was having to rent them quite a lot and I could afford it, but I have such an issue with scarcity from my past that I am really quite frugal. I should have moved into video sooner. I had the equipment. Around the time I signed with Lisa Pritchard, was around the time I got my YouTube channel because I really thought that I couldn't do YouTube unless I had a photo agent because no one would take me seriously. So it was around that time I'd got the camera, I could have done it. I should have left my agent sooner. I should have quit sooner. I'm a big advocate for quitting. Quitting is good. If you want to quit something, quit it. And I'm not saying go and quit your job with no backup plan. Get the backup plan first, but don't stick at stuff for the sake of it. It's a waste of your life. Just quit. As soon as you go, this ain't for me, find a way out of it, quit. But that brought me to that phase. Now we're at the current phase. Now, things are good now. I'm in a good place. I'm not medicated nor self-medicated. I've got my new kit. I've got my 100 megapixel medium format. I've got my Cambo Actus MV. I've got my 90mm Cambo lens. That's my daily driver. Look at it there. We've got my video stuff. We're currently playing with some Eldachrome stuff, but we've got my 6K Blackmagics over here, wireless monitors and bits like that. I've got my little YouTube setup over here. My video lights, Aperture 600Ds, just swinging in shot there. Got a couple of extra Broncolor packs over here. Whoop, there we go. Obviously my big 2 modifiers from Broncolor over there. Very nice stuff. And now things are good. So I'm with my agent Pete, we're shooting big campaigns. It's been a mental start to the year, really busy, but we're in a good place for that. Where am I gonna put you? Now, throughout my career, I've made a lot of mistakes. And if I was going to do it again, I would do it very differently. And here's how I'd do it differently. How are we on time? I'm just waiting for Paul to turn up. Equipment-wise, if I was going to start today in 2026, I would buy an R5 with a memory card to let you shoot video, a 24-70, 100mm prime. I'd buy 2 AD600 Godox lights, or I'd buy 2 of the AD1200 Godox lights, the packs and heads. I'd buy 2 Aperture 600 Pro Ds, and all the peripheral bits, the softbox and all the rest of it. And that would be my setup. That's what I'd go for today. If I had, and that's probably going to be with computers and all the rest of it stands, £10,000 setup. Now, that's a lot of money. That's not a small amount of change. Obviously, if you had a job for one, you've got a career and you're 40 like I am, you can probably go, oh, I've got 10 grand kicking around, let's go and do that. Maybe you don't. If I didn't have 10 grand, I would get a 5D Mark II, 100mm prime, I'd get 2 second-hand Bowens lights and 2 second-hand Godox LEDs. I'd be looking at spending about £1,000 all in, which is still perhaps too much as it would have been for me. So I'd buy the camera and the lens first, and I'd buy one LED, because with the LED you can do stills and video, and then slowly build up the kit. You don't have to buy it all in one go. And that's how I'd do it. Now, career-wise, this is what will matter more than which way you go with the kit. I could get to the same point with either kit sets pretty quickly. But career-wise, choose what you want to be as a photographer. There aren't many famous photographers that have done everything. They don't. Annie Leibovitz, portrait photographer. You don't go to Annie Leibovitz because you want a still life doing. I'm sure she shot still lifes. So someone goes, well, actually, she did this one here. But that's not what you go to her for. You want to know who it is you are as a photographer. Do you have a particular genre you specialize in? Or like me, do you have a style you specialize in? I don't specialize in a genre, I specialize in a style. Knowing that will help you massively. And it will save you money as well, because it will stop you buying all the kit that I bought, because I was doing everything. When you want to do a bit of everything, you need a bit of everything, and it's expensive. And not only is it expensive, but you don't make as much. When you only do a little bit of something, you only need a little bit of kit and you get paid more because you're a specialist. So not only do you spend less, but you make more. I hope this video has been of helpful to someone. I hope this video has been of use to somebody. I hope somebody's gone, yeah, do you know what? That's great. I can get into this now. I can do this. I can be a photographer. I've got a rough idea of where I'm heading with this and the mistakes and pitfalls to avoid, because good old Scott made them for me. So there we go. I'm about to go and make myself a coffee because I've not had one yet, and we're now at 8:15. I've also got to crack on with my first day back at work. So have a great new financial year, folks, and I'll see you on the other side.